Hello and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. If you can't tell by my face, voice, or both, I'm kind of a bit under the weather, literally in fact. Was having a simple hay fever or cold or something like that. Some of my friends advised me not to do a review under this kind of condition, but hey, I got a weekly schedule to do, and damn it, I'm gonna stick to it. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's talk about another one of my favorite bands, the Electric Light Orchestra. First established as far back as 1970, a few members of a rock band called The Move, Jeff Lynne, Roy Wood, and drummer Bev Bevan, decided to come up with something unique. They wanted to do something different, something experimental. They wanted to combine the conventional rock beats of, say, the Beatles and The Who with the classical elements of an orchestra. And from this, they established the Electric Light Orchestra, first releasing their debut back in 1971, which I'll be getting into later down this year. However, due to some creative differences, Roy Wood kind of left the band to form his own band, Wizard, which would know as the band behind I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day, and Jeff Lynne kind of just essentially became the center, the head man, the conductor, if you will, of the ELO, and with a couple of violin and cello players and even keyboardist Richard Tandy, he went on to create some big hits across the 70s. Albums such as On the Third Day, El Dorado, Face the Music, A New World Record, and of course Out of the Blue, each having a hit single or two, be it Mama Bell, Showdown, Can't Get Out of My Head, Evil Woman, Living Thing, and of course Mr. Blue Sky. However, by the time the 80s rolled around, things started kind of changing a bit. Somewhat declining in popularity, while the albums from there weren't entirely too bad. They weren't really bigging in the big numbers per se, and by 1986, Jeff Lynne just kind of decided to just give up on the whole project. However, the drummer Bev Bevan decided to keep the name going in some way in ELO Part 2, or Electric Light Orchestra Part 2, and kept it going for the rest of the 80s and into the 90s. However, he too would eventually give up on it and kind of give up his royalties of the ELO name all back to Jeff Lynne by the end of the 90s. And so this must have gave Jeff a bit of a chance to officially revive the band, sort of, and make a new album under the ELO name. And it's that album we're looking at today. So let's take a listen at the Electric Light Orchestra's Zoom. We begin the album with the first track, Alright. Not to be confused with Is It Alright from the previous album, Balance of Power, which was 15 years earlier, coincidentally enough. Being the first and possibly only single of the album, if I can even call it that, Alright is a very easygoing, cruising kind of track. Yes, I know, I do feel a bit sweaty, I'll admit, but hey. This is also, strangely enough, the only track of the album to have another member besides Jeff Lynne himself to actually perform in the track, that being Richard Tandy, the keyboardist, keyboardist on this song. But you wouldn't exactly hear them until you've actually listened deeper into it. Otherwise, it just feels like another Jeff Lynne solo album disguised as an ELO album. But since it still kind of sounds ELO-ish, just minus the classic strings or the classic choirs and all that, it still has that classic Lynne sounding rock roll. Like I said, it's easygoing, mostly chill. Almost the kind of song you listen to while you're cruising through a busy city street or out on the motorway. It's still a very chill song, and it's probably one of the more underrated songs of the album. But with its plus with its lyrics of how life may be tough, but if you keep remembering and keep reminding yourself of the things that you enjoy, holding on to the things that make you feel alright, this is this is one I think a lot of people would enjoy if they give it a chance. Next is Moment in Paradise, a somewhat more slower, more softer track, more on par with our previous ELO songs like Waterfall, Summer and Lightning, and Ticket to the Moon. This was also kind of an attempt to be a single off the album, though I doubt this even did any better than Alright. However though, this features drums by Ringo Starr of the Beatles. Yeah, I guess considering that Jeff Lynne helped in producing the Beatles song Free the Bird, I guess he and George Harrison, as we'll see later, kind of attempted to return the favour. Lyrically, it's more or less another love song, being about how this person is wanting to spend time with this other person and spend kind of sell their soul, kind of protect their soul, like preserve them, kind of understand and appreciate them, just spend well that moment in paradise. If you're into the more softer rock side of ELO, this is another song I think deserves a bit of a listen through and see if it's worthwhile. Next is State of Mind, another rockier kind of track, much like Alright, and this one kind of sounds more reminiscent of the Secret Messages album, but with its rockier guitars compared to the more piano emphasizing of the previous track. This one lyrically seems to go from the point of view of someone who's wants to go around the world and see new things and kind of just have enjoy the fun of it, and but at the same time also being aware of potential risks of getting a bit too lost, a bit too immersed into anything, just being all in a state of mind essentially, kind of like the protagonist of the ELO album Time, how this person from the 1980s gets sucked into this far-off future of 2095. It almost seems a bit like a spin-off of that in a slight way, just minus the high-tech electronic sounds. It's another short yet very, very fun track with a very catchy bridge and chorus, and it does demonstrate, or still shows off Jeff Lynne's usual fun style and talents. After that we have Just for Love, another softer rock song of the album. It definitely reminds me a bit of something out of El Dorado or even Face the Music. While it is mostly an acoustic song, it does have mostly a bit of a electric guitar riff layered over it, which is still pretty good and very ELO sounding, which you expect from an ELO record. Lyrically, it is another love song, if you can guess from the title of the track, but this one also has some more simple yet fantastical imagery, what with signals dance upon the twilight and waiting there in the silver rain to meet the golden sun. And yeah, in case you haven't noticed, Jeff Lynne loves his rain, and he loves to use that motif a lot in his songs. Hell, he did a concerto about rainy days. There's also one among the few songs to actually use a cello in the track, but with the acoustic guitar, the electric guitar, the drum, and the choir, and like the backing vocals, which do remind me a bit of Strange Magic. You wouldn't be able to tell unless again you've listened very closely. it's in there, I know it. Speaking of which, that leads us to the next track, Stranger on a Quiet Street. Not to be confused with the song Stranger from the album Secret Messages. I'm sensing a pattern here. Never mind, who cares. Anyways, this one's another more. This one is definitely more on par with the classic ELO sound. The, the wall sound, the reverb, the backing vocals. It does sound like classic ELO, and it kind of makes me wonder why they didn't make this song a single. While the Stranger song from Secret Messages, which is another underrated ELO song that I really like, seems to be from the point of view of someone who's into putting themselves into a new environment and is themselves the stranger. This one seems to go from the point of view of someone who's encountering a stranger. Not necessarily the same one as that song, since here Jeff refers to this one as a she, and so implying that it's also potentially a love interest or a romantic interest. Who knows? It also kind of describes very well the environment and kind of build up of how it kind of describes the location they're in. The chills of night can call them home, the thrills have been forgotten, etc., etc. It's still another really good, catchy, underrated song from Jeff Lynne, and I think this definitely deserves a chance out of most of the songs of the album. Plus, with a bit of a shout out name drop to the album out of the blue, and you know you're in for a good ELO song. Anyway, that leads us to the actual opening of, well, actual strings of an orchestra that lead into the next song, In My Own Time. I know I said some of the previous songs up to this point have been kind of ELO sounding-ish, but I think it's at this point where it really starts to feel like ELO. And that's mostly with, well, the strings section that's used in this song. It actually makes it feel like an actual orchestra, if even a bit. And it also kind of still has that slow, jazzy vibe to it, which does seem something out of Jeff Lynne's typical rock and roll combining sort of styles. And there's even a bit of a surreal, like, middle eight section in it where we kind of hear hear a bit of tap dancing and a bit of Spanish speech. I'll admit my Spanish is a bit rusty, so anyone out there who knows a bit of Spanish could be able to translate it. All that's been done by Rosie Villa, who also did backing vocals for the All Right song, and at the time was in a relationship with Jeff Lynne himself. So I guess this was kind of her little big break, I guess. In terms of lyrical content, this one is essentially a breakup song about how this woman has been given Jeff nothing but doom, gloom, and misery for a good chunk of his life, and having enough, he just kind of cuts off from it and decides to well, be free, just kind of go off by his own time, as he says himself. And that's not exactly something you hear out of an ELO song, especially one sounding as soft and otherwise hopeful as it. And it also does kind of give off that kind of optimistic feeling, like as if he, not only is he moving on, he might go on to be in another relationship, or he just might just break free from this false idealization of love and romance and just kind of live his own life, just be himself. And I think that's something that he and anyone else could essentially relate to. And then we have Easy Money, shortest song of the album, clocking about 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and once again having Ringo Starr behind the drums, this definitely is a throwback to the classic rock and roll songs of the 50s. Not unlike something like Rock and Roll is King, among others. It's the kind of song you'd hear at in a jukebox at an old pub or something. Lyrically, it's about Jeff expressing his view of people who would rather find the easy way round to get money rather than trying to earn it. Those who care more about fame rather than more so than artistic integrity or creativity and whatnot. They're just, as I say, in it for the money. Hence the obvious meaning behind the name of the song, Easy Money. And this is also, straight enough, one of the very few times, if I recall, that Jeff Lynne actually swears in one of his songs. And I probably won't say the exact line, I'd probably get demonetized anyway. But needless to say, once you hear it, it sticks with you. And and that's what to do. Songs like this should stick to you, and this definitely does. It's classic. It's rockabilly. It's all around catchy, and that's what a lot of great AOL songs like these are. And and being the shortest, that's gotta say something. Plus, just before the guitar solo, you kind of hear Jeff kind of saying, "Take it, Jeff," as if he's signaling to himself to play the guitar solo. And as being good old tongue-in-cheek Jeff, I guess it's kind of his self-aware reference to how in this album, and of course for the rest of the albums onward, he kind of played and recorded most of the instruments by himself. And you gotta admire that. You gotta admire his determination and his multitasking and talent at multiple instruments. It really doesn't matter. It's another really catchy song of his. Decent riff and some good old singing from Jeff himself. Even if, like most of the album, it is a bit too crisp and a bit too safe and mid-range. I know I said most of the album has sort of been influenced by Rosie Vila and her relationship with Jeff Lynne. This one is definitely one of the more, or if not the most, autobiographical of Jeff Lynne's songs here. It kind of starts about how he reminisces about spending times across the waves and learning a lot of hardships and essentially just the repeated phrase of really doesn't matter at all. It seems to reflect how, despite all the hardships and things that he could have done better, it doesn't matter because he's still moving on to do new and different things. And one of those is being in a new relationship with Rosie, who he kind of alludes to when he kind of references how he took her over here and there and kind of she sung a tune for him and kind of she became the backing vocal and all that. It's another sweet song of his, and it's definitely it's another highlight of the album. Ordinary Dream is another classic sounding song from Jeff Lynne's ELO, especially with it being one of the only other songs to have actual strings in it. And this is also where the Jeff Lynne's kind of Beatlesque influence really show, both musically and lyrically. It's essentially yet another breakup song of sorts. Jeff kind of sings about how he just got this breakup letter from this romantic interest, and is trying to interpret what is and what went wrong, how he doesn't really understand the writing on the wall from you to me, and just kind of, like I said, trying to understand what really went wrong. I thought everything was going right, and you really do feel that. You really do feel the emotion in both Lynn's vocals and the music overall. The mood is, for lack of a better word, it's somber, and at the same time, it's still very beautiful. It is very similar to Moment in Paradise, but much, like I said, much more somber, and I do appreciate that. I still like it. Ordinary Dream also reminds me in a way much of Telephone Line, both with its lyrics of trying to make things up, that sense of urgency, while also having that kind of semi-grandiose tone from the music. Some may hear it as dismissed as a mere pale imitation, but if you like Telephone Line, I think you might like this song fine as well. Anyways, after that, we have A Long Time Gone, because poor literacy is excused because it's Jeff Lynne. Anyways, this is another more somber song, and strangely enough, this features George Harrison of the Beatles on slide guitar. Between this and having Ringo Starr, I'm starting to wonder if this is less an ELO album and more just a collaboration between Jeff Lynne and some of the remaining Beatles, or at least half of the Beatles. It's also on the other hand also very fitting because Jeff Lynne not only produced one of George Harrison's albums, Cloud Nine, but the two were also in a supergroup together alongside Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Roy Orbison, the traveling Wilburys, which I guess in a way kind of goes full circle. On the surface, it may be yet another kind of like sorrowful love song, but there's also a sense of yearning, a bit of unrequited love to it. Maybe not just to a particular person, but it can also be for a particular place or a feeling or something you grew up with. That sense of bittersweet nostalgia that's often manifested in a lot of Jeff Lynne's lyrics, and his guitar solo combined with George Harrison's slide guitar do help in emphasizing that loss of innocence, that loss of fun and hope and optimism that we often think about when we look back at our childhoods and the places and people we grew up in and grew up with. And it can go to show that Jeff Lynne is capable of doing good dramatic pieces, and this is another bittersweet song. It was very reminiscent of the title track of the El Dorado album, which which of course is a classic in and of itself, and this is just all around emotional and heart, and it just touches the soul. It just gets you at the feels. And the way it ends and fades out with that very harmonic vocal bit at the end, that very much reminds me of the opening of Kiss from a Rose by Seal. I think it's definitely the bittersweet cherry on top of this cake of sorrow about to fall. Melting in the Sun is another basic paint-by-numbers track from the ELO. It's not bad. I still love many of their songs. It's just there's not really much to songs like this one. It's basically another relaxed, chill, groovy rock kind of song with some pretty, somewhat slice-of-life lyrics going into about how things can impress you and kind of go away in an instant, like as if they've melted in the sun, like as indicated in the chorus of this track. Lynn still plays it fine, still sings fine. His guitar's still pretty riffing. It's decent. It's not bad. It's just average. It's one of the more average songs. I wouldn't call any of these songs bad. At worst, I would just say they're not as good as certain others. And I think this is where the album kind of drags on a bit much, even if it's like 3/4 through the entire album. And yeah, it's it's not terrible. It's just okay. This is a more okay song. This is it's just average. All She Wanted, on the other hand, does definitely pick up from there. Again, featuring sliding guitars from George Harrison. This is a very good, chill, yet chunky hard rock track that does remind me a bit of Do Ya and Mama Bell. It's also probably among the last times that George Harrison will actually play on any song before his eventual and tragic passing in November of that year of 2001. And it is just just listening to this just kind of makes me feel kind of regretful and sorrowful for that man's premature passing. We can at least appreciate what we had now that he and John Lennon are gone. In terms of lyrics, it's mostly about this woman who doesn't want anything diamonds, golds, or anything materialated. All she wants is a loving man, someone to be compassionate to her, to treat her with equal respect, and just all around someone she could trust and put her faith and all around fortune to. Just someone she wants to generally who wants to spend time with her and someone she wants to spend her life with. It is definitely another song that kind of tells a story about a particular character. I do like it when songs kind of we create a song, a story, and a character through the form of music. It's not easy, but when it's done well, it's done really well, and this is no exception. With its minimalistic lyrics and the reoccurring phrase of "all she wanted was a loving man," you're down for a classic of a recent but very underrated ELO track. And considering this album as a whole, that says a lot. We then close out the Zoom album with Lonesome Lullaby. And that what actually feels like not only a good closer to this album, but it kind of sounds like an actual ELO song with an actual cello that can be heard, as opposed to just kind of being faintly heard or just peering here or there but never actually taking the front and stage now and then. This actually does give it that chance, and it does pay off. Lyrically, it seems to be a bit of a sarcastic statement from Jeff Lynne, being the tongue-in-cheek man that he is, kind of going from the point of view of someone who's listening to this other person who's this narcissistic egotist who has no self-awareness, and they're whinging on about how they just got their comeuppance and they got their payback, and Jeff just keeps listening and reveling all in, just taking in how they've just got a taste of their own medicine. That that kind of describes me when I listen to certain people on Twitter, to be frank. And the way it ends off with that suspenseful yet very satisfying almost country-esque guitar riff that just kind of strums in and just kind of scatters away. And that sounds, to me, it kind of feels like more of an actual closure to the album as opposed to Send It from Balance of Power, where it just kind of fades away and that's it. This actually does feel like an actual closure to this album, and that's an excellent choice right there. So overall, ELO Zoom is a very underrated album from an already very niche band like the Electric Light Orchestra. And some might be wondering, why doesn't this didn't turn out as well as it could have? Well, there may be some few ideas. Some say there was a bit too little too late, of it being 15 years after Balance of Power, and most of the world just kind of moved on. And it also could be just the right fit, the right product at the wrong place, the wrong time, or the right place at the wrong time. I don't know. But either way, this really didn't really do much well in terms of topping charts or making big singles or anything, and even critics at the time weren't very critical of it, just very apathetic towards it. And apparently, sales of it were so bad that a potential live gig tour in the North America were just kind of postponed, if not downright cancelled. And since then, we've all thought that that will be the last we'd hear from the actual Electric Light Orchestra. That would probably be the case until over a decade later, until we've got 2015's Alone in the Universe and 2019's From Out of Nowhere. And from out of nowhere, those albums were. But I'll get into those in another time, in another place. For now though, Zoom is a very underrated album, and if you're a big ELO fan, or you want to listen to something that's different from, I say give this one a chance. It really deserves that chance to listen. Next time, we've got quite a few things celebration worthy. We've got the Father's Day, the summer solstice, the 25th episode of the series, and of course, the 50th anniversary of a particular prog rock album